An Affliction of the Heart by Anonymous Pegasus. Chapter 10. Aurora. Kuno yawned and stretched slowly, accidentally pushing the empty cake box off the bed and onto the floor. Thankfully, the box itself was empty. She had placed Warren's slice of cake on the fridge. Her stomach told her that maybe she shouldn't have eaten so much cake, but she was willing to put up with the discomfort. It was worth it. Already, Kuno had to memorize this date, so she could remember when her birthday was. Even if she was with somebody else, she would remember her birthday. And then that thought stopped Kuno in her tracks. The changeling sat up suddenly, blinking and turning to stare at the mirror across the room, watching her own reflection with wide eyes. Even if she was with somebody else? Was she really thinking of staying here with him? Kuno growled faintly, shaking her head and then rubbing her hoof against her temple slowly, trying to clear her mind. It was insane that she was even considering staying with Warden. He was a train wreck in motion, a perpetual mistake. Kuno's eyes fell on the collar around her throat, and she lifted a hoof to delicately prod at it. Her hoof slid over the Kuno, threaded onto it, and her gaze softened. Warden wasn't so bad. His heart was in the right place. He just needed a backbone. Or he was codependent and needed somebody to guide him constantly. The changeling frowned, and then dropped her hoof, sighing softly to herself. There was a sound at the door, and she turned to see Warden standing there, with a bucket and a spray bottle hanging from its one wing. I'm off to... Well, I thought I'd let you know I'd be gone for a little while. Warden finished lamely, looking away.
Off to tend your Aurora plants?
Kuno accused. Warren hung his head. I have to.
I'm coming with.
Kuno stated, slipping off the bed and stretching. I have to, Kuno. Or Wait, what? The Pegasus did a double take, blinking.
I'm coming with you,
Kuno said calmly, walking towards the door.
Show me this plant that's so special you're ruining your life for it.
Warren frowned at that, before giving a jerky nod. I suppose it can't hurt. Kuno waved a hoof.
So lead the way, then.
Warden led Kuno outside, and then turned towards her, raising a brow. You can fly, right?
I have wings,
Kuno pointed out with a roll of her eyes. Well, I just thought... Warden trailed off, before shaking his head and then bounding several steps, launching himself into the air. Kuno glanced around, biting her bottom lip. There was a flash of green light, and when it faded, a young blue Pegasus with a green mane was standing in Kuno's place, with a flower cutie mark. Changed Kuno bounded after Warden, launching into the air in turn. It took several flaps of her wings to get used to the way they worked in the air, before she got the hang of it and sped after the Pegasus. Warden was momentarily surprised when Kuno had caught up with him, looking her up and down and blinking once, before it dawned on him that she had changed.
Didn't want to get seen as a changeling,
Kuno pointed out. The Pegasus nodded once in understanding. It took a good 10 minutes of flying before Warren dipped down towards a clearing in the forest canopy. Kuno followed after him, landing beside the Pegasus in a long, soft grass. Warren waved a hoof for her to follow, as he started down an overgrown trail, pushing his way to a cliffside and a large ravine that cut down the length of it. Immediately, he started down it.
Jeez, are we gonna have to insert a bone key into a rock and go down a hidden spiral staircase?
Kuno asked, looking towards the line of sky that was visible through the top of the ravine. Warren blinked once, pausing and looking at her, bewildered. You've been here before? Kuno blinked slowly.
You can't be serious.
I'm not, Warren said with a laugh and a sly grin, shaking his head, poking his tongue at her teasingly. You're gullible.
Well, your face!
Kuno huffed, flailing a hoof at him and snorting. Warren just chuckled and continued down the ravine. Eventually the ravine terminated in a large clearing, covering in a thick canopy, with muted shafts of light coming down through the gaps in the greenery. The walls of the ravine clearing were slick with running water, and there was still a pool of it in the center, fed by the trickles coming down from the rocks. The slick edges of the rock were mossy, and there were creeping vines of some description all over it. The vine itself was a strange-looking thing, green, with red tendrils running through it that visibly throbbed with brightness, as though with a heartbeat. Yellow bulbs were scattered along the lengths of the vines, periodically, with those same red veins and delicate tendrils visible along the closed petals.
They're almost ready to bloom,
Warren said excitedly, bouncing on his hooves and pulling out his spray bottle, moving up the first bulb and inspecting it closely. After several long moments, he gave the bulb a single spray with the water bottle. Kuno watched with mild interest, head tilted to the side curiously.
So, you just spray them?
Warren looked back at the changeling with a single snort, shaking his head. No, this is a special formula. The changeling rolled her eyes.
So you added a little bit of fertilizer?
Actually, I steeped a collection of 5 very expensive, very hard to grow herbs in this water, so that they'll encourage growth in this vine. Aurora is so rare because it doesn't grow in the wild. It was created, Warren explained enthusiastically.
And what was it created for?
Kuno asked, peering at the vine as Warren went around spraying the bulbs individually, carefully inspecting each before spraying them, and the vines surrounding them. Well, it was originally designed as an all-purpose plant. It's a powerful anesthetic when it's diluted right, as well as an amnesiac. Makes it rather useful as a drug for operating rooms, because it ruins your short-term memory completely. Anything from when you woke up, you will not remember. But that also makes it a very, very bad date rape drug, Warren said with a deep frown. There was even a case of Pony who murdered his wife and then injected himself with Aurora so he'd forget he ever did it. Kuno blinked and wrinkled her nose.
So it's a narcotic and a date rape drug? No wonder it's illegal.
Warren gave a weak laugh at that. Oh, and, when you distill it right and mix it with ammonia, the real Sultan crystals are, well, rather volatile when they're mixed up with simple water.
Volatile?
Kuno asked flatly. They explode, Warren pointed out.
Goodness, it's a date rape drug, an illicit substance, and an explosive?
Kuno asked aghast, staring at the plant. Well, it was manufactured, Warren pointed out with a helpless shrug. It's a cross between several different plants, actually, which is why it's so damn hard to keep the vine alive and thriving. It was a group of unicorns back in the day who partnered up with the growing consortium of the Old Earth Pony Growers League, and they designed the perfect plant. A plant that could be used for anything. They failed miserably and came up with Aurora. They chose vines because they could use vertical space rather than fields, and a Pegasus team could help pick the fruits once it was good and ripe. Don't know who found out about the exploding thing, but it's something to do with the magic that manifests in the plant during the growing phases. Once the sap is crystallized, it dries out so far that the addition of water causes a massive expansion. Then there's the friction so great it sets the air around it on fire, and the displaced air causes a pressure wave like an explosion. Apparently, if you set it off in sub-zero conditions or in a vacuum spell, you're left with this fluffy white substance that's softer even than clouds.
But why even use it as a narcotic in the first place if it's so hard to grow?
Kuno asked, bewildered. Because it's non-lethal. You can't overdose on it, no matter how you take it. You might knock yourself out for a few days, maybe die from the dehydration from not drinking or eating, but the actual drug itself can't kill you, Warren pointed out with a wry smile. Not to mention there are no documented long-term ill effects. Well, except the addiction.
So hospitals won't pay for Aurora?
Kuno queried, lifting up one of the bulbs gingerly and peering at it. Warren snorted once. Pay for it? They'd kill for this stuff. An anesthetic that is non-harmful and causes manageable, precise amnesia? If it wasn't so hard to grow, they'd stop using morphine at all.
Then why not sell it to the hospital? You could go legit. Get a license, or a pardon, or something from Celestia, or something.
Kuno pointed out with a grin. And I could have my wings broken by Daggertail and his underlings, Warren stated with a defeated sigh. I'm one of the last growers in this entire region. All the others either gave it up entirely and sought protection from the Royal Guard, or left entirely. I think they even killed one of the other ponies who could grow it. Kuno splayed her ears back at that, frowning deeply.
And if Daggertail wasn't around?
Then some pony else would replace him, Warren said with a slow shake of his head. I know you want to help, Kuno, but I'm stuck here. I'm happy where I am. I get to grow one of the hardest plants ever, and I'm good at it. And I guess it makes people happy.
And it destroys their lives.
Kuno added, with a single stamp of her hoof. Warren stared down at his forehoofs, poking at the rock sadly. I guess, yeah. But I try not to think about it. I can't change it, and it just makes me depressed. Kuno frowned at that, shaking her head before she stepped over, closer to the Pegasus, and then hugged around him with her forehoofs, rubbing her cheek against his own smoothingly.
If I help you get rid of Daggertail, you gotta give me all the love, okay?
Warren gave a hollow laugh. If you got rid of him and got his goons off me, I'd marry you. Kuno snorted once and then nudged the Pegasus, rolling her eyes.
Be careful what you offer, Warren.
You're not stupid enough to hold me to that, Warren said with a shake of his head.
You're right,
Kuno replied instantly. Warren splayed his ears back at that, giving a soft sigh. Kuno snorted once, lifting the Pegasus' head up with her hooves.
Oh, grow up,
she chided, licking between his eyes slowly.
Marriage is overrated. I'd much rather your goal be to get me into bed.
Warren blinked once at that, looking up at her. Kuno grinned innocently.
As your wife, I'd make you utterly miserable. But in bed, I'd make you love me.
The Pegasus mulled that over for several moments before drawing back and staring at her. How many stallions have you been with?
Hundreds.
Kuno replied shamelessly.
Even some mares.
Warren shirked back at that, wrinkling his nose. Wow.
Call me a whore or easy or anything like that, and I'm going to eat your eyeball.
Kuno stated flatly. Hundreds, Warren pointed out, lips pursed.
And how many meals have you had, Warren? Thousands?
Kuno asked, eyes narrowing. I guess, Warren replied, bewildered. Kuno raised a hoof, waving at it angry.
That's what sex is to me. A meal. I don't do it for intimacy. I don't want intimacy with the ponies I'm taking love from. I want their love. And sex is such an easy way to get it. If you could get a free buffet anytime you wanted, would you do it?
Warren frowned deeply, looking away. Well, when you put it that way.
Good boy,
Kuno said, smiling wryly and patting the Pegasus on the shoulder. You haven't been, contemplating seducing me just for a meal? Warren asked, trying to sound apprehensive, but coming more across as eager than anything else.
I resisted the urge. Perhaps a few days ago when my reserves were low. Why do you ask?
Kuno queried, an ear perking. Oh, I really like Spitfire, Warren said as he started back down the ravine. Kuno rolled her eyes, following after him with a shake of her head, her tone turning accusing as she pushed him with a hoof.
Pervert.